Hello, and thanks for coming back for more adventures in miniature books. I was very happy that we actually did produce the first one and got it put on YouTube. I certainly learned a great deal from that experience. I was very happy with it, and my grandson came in and he said, "Granddad, you did a YouTube." I said, "Yeah, I did a YouTube." He said, "Granddad, I've done three." And then, "Oh, well, that's good. I've done one." And he said, "Let me see it." And so he did. He sat and he watched the entire thing. And at the end of it, he was very quiet. And I said, "Well, tell me what you thought." And he said, "Granddad, it was rap." And I just beamed. I thought, "Oh, this is wonderful." And then he said, "Well, if you add a C in front of it." So I hope that this one will not be crap. I did take a look at it myself, and I discovered that I didn't like the camera so far back. This is what I saw. Yeah, not a very pretty picture. Okay, so the last time that we stopped, we had talked about the when, and we had talked about the a little bit about the how, and the where, and or rather the what. And now we're going to talk about where they are, where they're produced, and a little bit more about why you would even want to collect them. Okay, so let's get started with the where. Now, in the United States, of course, we think we know everything. And for years, I had heard that the most miniature books were produced in the United States. Now, there's no question there are a great deal of miniature books printed in the United States. But then when you start looking outside of the United States, especially in Europe and Russia, you find out that in the last 120 years, there were a great deal of printing of miniature books in Europe and in Russia. Now, Russia is not quite as large as the United States as far as Russia or the Soviet Union. Soviet Union did print quite a few propaganda miniature books, and I collect those, and they're rather neat. And even in China, they created some very small red books of Mao Zedong, and so those are very hard to come by, and I've got a couple of them. So in Europe, especially in Germany and in Hungary, you have a tremendous number of publishers of very fine miniature books. Now, the one thing about Hungary, and I have a moderate collection of Hungarian books, but the one thing about Hungarian books is they, not all of them by any means, but especially the ones that were done during when they were behind the Iron Curtain. And the problem, or not necessarily a problem, but the thing that I'm not crazy about is that they used a method of binding called perfect binding. And it's anything but perfect binding. And what it is that you cut the edge of the book and then the block of the pages, and then you glue it to the spine. Well, I've seen examples of Hungarians, holding a large book by one sheet, and it doesn't come out. That's true. I was also in the publishing business for over a decade, and I can tell you that there's not a horse glue that holds a book as well as sewing. And we would Smythe sew our books. That's just a way of sewing. And so that's my only complaint. That's my only problem, I guess, with Hungarian books during the Soviet occupation. But they did a tremendously large number of very fine books. And some of my favorite books are Hungarian. Can't read a word of it, but I still enjoy it. And they're easy to see the words. You can see the words. I just don't read Hungarian. Now, the other is Germany. Germany continues to make some excellent miniature books, highly collectible. And the thing that and there are several publishers, but one publisher in particular is doing contemporary miniature books in English and in German. And I believe that the majority of collectors are in English-speaking countries. And the one thing that I've found is that in Europe, so many people know English. And so, books that are printed in English are going to be popular even to maybe a German-speaking collector. All right, Scotland. Scotland has David Bryce, which David Bryce and Company was a small firm that printed at the turn of the last century some outstanding dictionaries, Bibles. They're all very tiny and very well printed. One of my best friends is a collector. He and his wife are collectors and producers of miniature books in Scotland. And so I'm always interested in what's going on there. South America is starting to produce some miniature books, and they're looking good. They're beginning, and so is Mexico, and of course in Canada, all of Northern America, you've got producers of miniature books. Now, the one thing that I want to talk about, though, the thing that has impressed me the most is Hong Kong and Japan. So let's go and let's take a look at what's happening there. Do you remember this machine? These were great machines. For a quarter or 50 cents, you could get a basically 5-cent prize that you would lose within about 10 minutes, or you'd put it in your pocket and it would dissolve. Well, these machines, I thought they were only in America, but apparently they're all over the world. And if you can waste your money in a gumball machine or a prize machine, obviously they're going to be everywhere. So Asia, and this is the Asian part of the Asian continent, and there is to the side there the beautiful island nation of Japan. And this young lady, Miyako Akai, she came up with a radical idea for popularizing miniature books. Miyako is a dear friend of mine, and I was honored to host her and her husband during the annual meeting of the Miniature Book Society in Charlottesville, Virginia, several years ago. That was Miyako's first visit to the USA, and she returned the next year to another annual meeting called a conclave. And she was one of 3 honored by the Miniature Book Society at this last conclave. I wish I could have been there. Now, one thing about this young lady, she is exceedingly creative. She is, and I would say more than anything, she is dedicated to helping people see the value of small, the value of miniature books. So, this is what she did. She reimagined the toy machine. And in Japan, they call this a Gashapon machine. And I probably mispronounced that. So in 2006, Miyako hit upon the idea of gathering together miniature book artists and creating miniature books and putting them into those little plastic eggs. 6 years later, the idea was adopted and used throughout Hong Kong. On top of the Gashofon machine in Japan, Miyako and her miniature book artist showcased the books that one might get by putting in some yen and turning the dial. Now, the machines are mainly placed in bookstores and tea shops. Each month, the machine is totally sold out, and shopkeepers call for more eggwich. Now, this is the name that Miyako came up with for those little plastic containers. They're eggwiches, and I think it's very, very creative. That is what they call those plastic containers that contain miniature books. It is reported that in the bookstores there will be people who will stand there and continue to put money in just to get one particular book. And they're pleased. They spend a rather large amount of money just getting one book. I'm fortunate because I know the person, I know Miyako very well, and I also know the young lady who does this eggwich in Hong Kong, and Tiana Wong, and I get a copy of their listing, and I just order them directly and tell her what I want, and I get them, and I love them. I really do. They are beautiful. So I ran across the eggwich and its founder, Tiana Wong, in Hong Kong, and she placed this little plaque that talks about the eggwich and the purpose. And the purpose basically is to introduce people to miniature and to concentrate on that size is not necessarily a deterrent in a book. So here are a few of the miniatures that I found in my eggwich. This one is a beautiful little one called a duck. And what this one is a box, and you open the box, and then there's the little book inside. All of this is made by hand, by the way. The next one is the crane. This is about origami, obviously. And within the book, there are several origami, I'm not really sure. And then I particularly liked this one because I've never had a radish cake, and you open up this one and it is a recipe and when you should eat a radish cake and what they are good for. This is one of their more popular ones, the next one, which is pool. Very simple. The colors in mine are particularly vibrant, and I thought this was one of the really most beautiful ones they had. Then the next one is bus, and this one is nothing more than telling the story of school children on a bus, and the yellow is particularly nice, and all of these fit in those little eggwich or the plastic containers. Now, Tiana Wong meets with her book artist almost daily. She is very dedicated. And if you'll notice where they're sitting, that is their headquarters, and the crystal balls hanging down from the ceiling are their miniature books that they have sold over the last couple of years. Miyako Akai was the sensei. I knew I would say that wrong, or teacher of Tiana Wong. And she's also mine. She's taught me a great deal. And they meet for tea and cakes quite often, and they're very, very close friends. Their books have been sold in miniature, are in these vending machines for a number of years, and they keep having to add more books and add more of little eggwiches, sometimes weekly. They're so popular. All right. So why collect miniature books? Why? Big books are really neat, but why collect them? Well, a dear friend of mine who lives in England, he's older than I, and he's a bookseller, and he was at the International Miniature Book Society. Now, this is not the one in the United States. This is the one that is out of Europe. And he was interviewed several years ago, and they asked him why collect miniature books. And his answer is, you can carry around an entire library in your pocket. And he literally reached in his pocket and showed, an entire library, something that you could read for several days and not get them all done. Most of the miniature books are easily readable, and basically it falls to the individual collector as to why they collect them. Now, I'm going to give you a rundown of a couple. I find number one is the hunt. I used to collect Walt Disney toys from the 1920s and 30s. And my favorite thing was the hunt, was going to these shows and finding these beautiful figures and old books and all this great stuff. And I found with miniature books, it's the same thing. Nothing is more exciting than finding a book, a miniature book, that no one's ever heard of. Now, by now, a guy by the name of Robert Bradbury put into book form all of the books of the 20th century and many of the books prior to that. He did an outstanding job. Man was a librarian and a tremendous educator. One of the group of books that I wanted to have every copy of are these right up here. I don't think you can see them. It's Black Cat Press. And Black Cat Press was out of Chicago at first, and then it moved a little bit. But anyway, the fellow that did Black Cat Press, I have every one of his books except one. And that book is 1601. And if you have a copy of it, let Rick know. I really would appreciate it. But I'm looking through eBay the other night at 3 in the morning. And here's a miniature book that I had never heard of. Only 100 copies of it were made, and it is announcing his daughter's birth in 1934. This is almost a decade before he produced miniature books. I put a buy it now on that book so fast. And I haven't seen it yet, but I know that it's come because I was alerted to it. I was so thrilled. I couldn't wait to tell my wife in the morning how excited I was. But the hunt is definitely novelty. You saw the books if you were watching last time. The large books, and then look like they're shrunk down to the size of a miniature. And it's a novelty to have that and to have these books. And all of my friends from high school, if I ever go to a reunion, they invariably have asked me, do you still collect miniature books? I remember that collection. That was really neat. You were the only person I ever knew that collected miniature books. And I say, yeah, I've got a couple of thousand. And they're excited. They want to know, for about 5 minutes, they want to know. So the novelty is definitely part of it. And then you can collect new books. These books behind me are all books made in the 20th century. And the books that are on my side are books from the 1800s, 1700s, 1600s, and I have one from the 1500s. Uh, Actually, in pretty good shape for a book that's that many years old. But I want to show you what I think is the most important reason, or the reason that has brought me into collecting, and it's the beauty of the cover and the integrity of the artist. So here are a couple of books that I want to highlight. And I have to tell you, this is my favorite. This is from Poole Press. Mary Lynn Poole Adams is the artist, and this obviously is the embroideries of Mary, Queen of Scots. She didn't make a great number of copies of this one, and it's exceedingly difficult to find because it's several decades old, and it was sold out very quickly, and about the only way that you can get one, because I would say more than half of the ones that she produced are now in museums. So the only way you can find it is to find someone who passed away, who was a collector, and sold their relatives, sold their collection to either a local bookstore, and that's how I got my copy. They sold their entire collection, and I bought just about everything. So this is a beautiful book. Mary Lynn Poole Adams was a true, or is a true artist, and her integrity in her art is that she goes from the paper to the binding to, no matter how intricate it has to be, she is going to make a fabulous book for one to own. The next one is an almanac. And this is one that I really wasn't sure about buying, and finally decided I loved the cover. I'd never seen the inside, and when I got my copy, I was in love with this book. And it is, as that's the cover, or the box that it comes in. But when you open it up, the front cover looks exactly like that. Dream for Winter is one of her more creative ones, and this is one that is exceedingly difficult to find because it's so unique. Libraries and museums, the books like this are always sought after by libraries. Song of the Wandering Angus. I love this one because, again, she has used her sewing skills. And the neat thing about this one is the container for it is like, whatever fishermen carry with their fish and their tackle and all that stuff. And it's embroidered also. All right, this is a different publisher. This is the Ward Scory Press. And Ward Scory, he would produce a normal book, and then he would produce an extra special book with an artist from either Italy, Spain, or somewhere. And this one in particular is my wife's favorite. I have 3 different copies in 3 different sizes and 3 different colors of this book. And these, I don't remember the number of how many were printed, but it wasn't that many. This is Lullaby Book of Poems. The next one is Christmas Carols. And I saw this in a catalog of a very dear friend of mine, and by the time I called to order it, it was gone. And lo and behold, the next one is a variation, and I called another friend, and they had it. And so one of those 2 is my copies. The next one is Fireflies. Now, the beautiful thing about Fireflies is they made a number, and I'm not going to put a number to it, but I think it was 4 or 5 different variations. And I don't just mean colors. I'm talking about different pictures, beautifully illustrated on the cover. And I think I own 3 of them. All right, the next one is Rebecca Press. And Rebecca Bingham is a very, very dear friend of mine. She lives in Maryland. And this is her book that is fairly recent, a couple of years ago, The Lady or the Tiger. And this is the deluxe. Now, the deluxe is obviously bound in a very fine leather. And what I want you to pay attention to is this next one. This is the foredge of The Lady or the Title. Now, first it is gilded, and then it is gauffered. Now, this is a process of using a hot iron and pressing down and creating a pattern. You see this on books every once in a while in the 17th or 18th or 19th century. You very rarely see this done on books contemporary or miniature books. You have to be a very good artist in order to do this. The next one is one of my favorites because of the concept of the artist goes through from the very first page to the binding, to the poetry, to the type of the words that are used, defining the rainbow. And she did this in a deluxe edition as well as the standard. This is the standard, which quite honestly I like better. I love it. This is another one that I coveted for many years, and finally, at one of those conclaves, the meeting of the Miniature Book Society, I was walking by Rebecca Bingham's desk, and they were selling books, and lo and behold, there is a copy of New House by David Mamet, and I snatched that thing up as quickly as I could. This is a great combination of a wonderful writer and a fabulous miniature book producer. Another one that I had to have was The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and it took me about 10 years to find this copy of it, and I'm happy to say that it is in my library now. From Sunflower Press, this is a book that almost everybody wants and almost nobody has. This is Mask. And Joe D'Ambrosio helped in the design. He was an artist in the late 20th century. And his books, his miniature books, are among the most creative in the entire universe of miniature books. He decided to put a real mask embedded on the cover, and really a nice thing. All right, this is just one book from the collection of Neil Albert. Neil is in the miniature book world, a very famous and very kind miniature book. Well, hard to say. He is a collector, but he is the person who hires artists to create miniature books for him. And then he donates them to libraries. And he's some of the most beautiful work. And I will do, if Neil will allow me, I will do an entire session on Neil Albert's work. The final score in Scotland are 2 very dear friends of mine, Stephen and Marianne Byrne. And I'm only going to show you a couple of theirs. The Medieval Wine, Stephen is the binder, and Marianne is the, is that needlepoint? I don't know. And then there's Shakespeare's Flora. Absolutely beautiful books. All right. That is basically the why and where. So we've done the who, what, where, when, why, and how, and that concludes it. I was really surprised. I didn't understand. I kept getting messages that people were subscribing. And honestly, I didn't know what that meant at all. My grandson finally told me that that's a good thing, because I thought I was going to have to be sending out newspapers and newsletters. I did get a letter, an actual letter, and I thought that this was kind of neat because, number one, it smells of perfume, and it is from Charlie. God, Charlie's got really fancy lettering. Charlie Theron, Charlize Theron, in Beverly Hills, California. What? Charlize. Okay. My producer told me it was Charlize. Well, that wouldn't be a guy. That must be a girl. Okay, let's read it. I'm opening it up yet, and I know that fragrance. It's Jardot or whatever. My wife uses that, and it's one of my favorites. Dear Rick, I saw your little hearts on the top. That's kind of weird. I saw your YouTube broadcast on miniature books, and I was enthralled by the books, but especially you. You are very handsome. No, what? Just a second here. Oh my. Okay. I have one question that I am very anxious to get answered from you. Are you married? Love, Charlize Theron, and then her says private phone number. And then there are 20 different size red hearts. Well, okay. What? Oh, okay. Stephen, my cameraman, has told me that he has worked with Charlize Theron and that she was an Academy Award winning recently. Oh, she was an Academy Award winning artist, and he has a picture of her. So let's see who this is. Oh my God. That's Charlize Theron. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for that letter. Tell you what we're going to do. Marianne, that's my production assistant. Get some of those pictures that I had made, and not the color ones, the black and white ones that we had printed at Kinko's. And no, don't say love, Rick. No, put right. Hope things get better for you, and then put RH. And while you're at it, get a restraining order, and then I think would be better. Okay, well, that's I guess that's the exciting thing about celebrity. So exciting. All right, I promised you that at the end of each one of these terribly long things that we would talk about the how. How do you get miniature books? And that's what we're going to go to now. Our first bookseller is Karen Nyman. Now, Karen is retired, and her only business is miniature books. Personally, I have been buying from Karen for many decades. It just seems as if Karen has always been there to sell me her miniature books. The first place to start when you are interested to see what Karen Nyman has to sell is to visit her very well-planned and easy-to-use website at KarenNymanMiniatureBooks.com. When the website opens, you will see Karen's most current page. Now, she does something that is fun for collectors. Every Monday morning, she puts up a special miniature book at a reduced rate. She often has multiple copies of the book for sale at the reduced rate. Now, if you have signed up for her e-catalog, then you will receive this page on Monday morning or early in the weekend before. Placing an order is very simple, as you merely respond to the email and say that you want the book. Be sure to add your complete mailing address. Now, to access her very large number of different catalogs, click on the Catalog button at the top. This will take you to her list of previous e-catalogs, which contain about 100 miniature books every other month, and her specialty catalog by publisher. And these are all the different publishers, and the list keeps going on. I didn't scroll down. So let's click on Publisher Black Cat Press. What will open will be the actual books which Karen currently has in stock and ready to sell to you. Karen does an exceptional job of explanation, from author to year to copies printed to binding to description and to exact size. Any flaws will most likely be explained. Now, there will not be pictures of every single book. However, should you require a photo, Karen will gladly and rather quickly send you a set of digital pictures of the book of which you are interested. Sometimes this takes a day, because sometimes she's out of her house. I mentioned Karen's e-catalogs, and these are something very special. Once every other month or so, Karen will gather 100 miniature books together and place them in a big e-catalog. Karen lives on the West Coast and I live on the East Coast, and I gladly stay up late into the night in anticipation of her e-catalog. There are usually brand new and ultra-rare books, and plenty of them. You can access the most current one of the e-catalog pages. Just go to the catalog page. If you look closely at the listing of micro miniatures, you will see that the second book listed is sold on the right-hand side. Karen does an excellent job of keeping these catalogs up to date. However, I would always contact Karen by email or phone to verify that a book is still available. Her specialty books or rare books will be further down the list and are always in full color. So how do you become privy to this cornucopia of miniature books? It's simple. You sign up on her website for the e-catalogs. Karen is very easy to work with, and she is consistent. For several years, she has maintained a single standard rate for shipping her books. 1 book, 10 books, 20 books, it's the same rate. The rate has been less than the actual postage, and quite honestly, I've been after Karen to raise her rate by at least $1, but she has kept it low. I will not mention her current rate, as she may alter that rate, but she will let you know what to add to your purchase. Oh, and under certain circumstances, she will take PayPal, so you might inquire about that if that's important. In the miniature book world, everyone knows and respects Karen Nyman, and she is usually the first person one goes to when searching for a miniature book. Our other bookseller is Joan Lorson. For many years, Joan and her husband Jim owned and operated Lorson's Books and Prints. When Jim passed away several years ago, Joan kept up the family business. She finally consolidated her remaining stock into her home and shuttered the storefront business. Of course, Joan has a website, However, Joan herself is not totally versed in the intricacies of the internet. She employs a young man to assist her. And however, there may be times that a book is marked as available when in fact it has been sold. So you will need to call Joan to verify. The starting point is to go to LorsonBooksAndPrints.com. Now, it's Lorson, no S, LorsonBooksAndPrints.com. The homepage is rather long, but it will be worth your time to slowly to look through the specialty miniature books along the way to the bottom. Joan keeps up her stock and will let you know on the homepage of any exciting new acquisitions. At the bottom of the page, you will want to slide over to the left lower hand corner and click on Miniature Books. The page will open to a very complete and easy-to-use system of finding books from the various publishers, and at the bottom of the page, one can find smaller miscellaneous publishers, miniature books from the 17th to the 19th century, odds and ends, and bibliographs. So, as we did on Karen's page, let us click on Black Cat Press. Each book is listed alphabetically on Joan's page. There are two icons to pay particular attention to. The first is the camera. So let's click on the camera icon of the very first book on Black Cat Press. Whoa! Lo and behold, it is the precious book 1601, the very book that I need to complete my collection of Black Cat Press books. Look at this book and wonder, how can I get Rick a copy of 1601 and fulfill his lifelong dream of owning every one of Black Cat Press books? I just need that one book to be complete. Help me. If you have a copy of that book, let me know and we will talk. I need that book. Oh, okay. Sorry for that. Let's go back to the Black Cat Press page. The other icon that you need to pay attention to is on the opposite side of the camera icon. And in the case of the book, 1601, it has a red sold. Darn it. However, the next book has a price of $30. So you want that book and you order it. Hold on there, partner. Joan's lists aren't always up to the minute correct. Your best method of buying a book from Joan is not to contact her through email, but to phone her directly and inquire if that particular book is available. Now, to the left of the price, you will find a letter and number combination. In the case of 1601, it is RB number 16. The RB refers to Robert Bradbury, who compiled all of the miniature books of the major printers and listed them in his book, 20th Century United States Miniature Books. He did this by date that they were published. So RB 16 would mean that it was the 16th book published by Black Cat Press. You must tell Joan that reference number, as that is how she has arranged her books. I love buying books from Joan, as we tend to talk on the phone much too long and catch up on old friends. All right, we have actually done 2 of these in the can. I appreciate so much you spending a little time with me, and I hope it's been educational. And I hope it's been fun. Because, if I don't have fun in my life, what's life worth? And so I'm always going to have fun. See you later. And I don't pay attention to what my grandson says. He's in the 3rd grade. What does he know? Bye-bye.
tempered in God's domain.